Donald Trump's threats and his ultimatum to Putin to end the war within 50 days or else things will get painful seem to be starting to work. India, as one of the largest buyers of Russian oil, has stated that it will easily stop buying Russian oil altogether if Trump really imposes secondary tariffs. And they will face a choice between supporting the Russian war machine and the American market. Today, the Indian authorities officially stated that they are already looking for alternative oil suppliers in case Putin does not end the war by autumn. And it seems that these are not just empty words, because India has decided right now, to buy as much cheap Russian oil as possible as if for the last time, and has even announced who they will buy it from next. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is already complaining that oil revenues have dropped critically and created a huge hole in the budget. My name is Aleksei Pechiy. Today is July 17th. Let's discuss this topic. There's really something to discuss here because India didn't just make this statement for no reason, and it's definitely not just empty words. Before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. So India is confident that it will be able to meet its oil needs through alternative sources if supplies from Russia are affected by the secondary sanctions that Donald Trump has promised to introduce. This was officially stated today by the Indian Minister of Oil, Hardeep Singh Puri. United States President Donald Trump, let me remind you, on Monday threatened to impose sanctions against buyers of Russian oil, Russian gas and so on if Moscow does not reach a truce with Kyiv within 50 days. And further, I will quote the Indian Minister of Oil, India will be able to handle any problems related to imports from the Russian Federation by seeking supplies from other countries. It is worth noting the emergence of many new suppliers in the market, such as Guyana, as well as available supply from existing producers, including Brazil or Canada. I'm not worried about this. If something happens, we'll handle it. India has already diversified its sources of supply, and we have increased the number of supplier countries from 27 to 40. It's telling that India seems to be really preparing to give up Russian oil. And right now, they're just filling up their storage to the brim. The volume of Russian oil imports to India in the first half of the year slightly increased, with almost half of it going to private oil refining companies, Reliance Industries and Nayara Energy. This is evidenced by data obtained from sources in the industry. India received about 1.75 million Russian barrels per day from January to June. This is 1% more than in the same period last year. The two mentioned private oil refiners have a long-term agreement to purchase Russian oil, while state-owned companies rely on spot market purchases. That means they can very quickly stop buying Russian oil at any moment. That means the minister's words carry weight. From January to June, Russia remained the largest supplier of oil to India, providing about 35% of all imports. Next are Iraq, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States. Overall, oil imports to India in January to June increased by almost 4.5%, reaching 5.2 million barrels per day. The volume of Russian oil purchased by India in June increased by 17.5% compared to May, reaching about 2 million barrels per day. India is currently filling up its storage to facilitate switching to other suppliers in the future. Now, the most interesting part. As stated by the largest oil refining company in India, in case of disruptions in supplies from Russia, the company will very quickly return to the previous supply scheme that was in place before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. When the overall share of Russian supplies to India was less than 2% overall, the Indians now look as calm as possible. For 3.5 years, they made money on cheap Russian oil, since few in the West were willing to buy it. In fact, India has never been dependent on Russian supplies. Until February 2022, India bought only 2% of its total oil from Russia. That was it. Then it increased that to 35% because the oil was cheap. And accordingly, now India has enough alternative suppliers to stop buying Russian oil overnight. That is, India's interest in buying Russian oil was only because the Kremlin was willing to sell crude oil for next to nothing, with a huge discount. India processed all this crude oil at its refineries and sold petroleum products to the West at market prices. The Joe Biden administration turned a blind eye to this, fearing a sharp spike in gasoline prices. And here, experts say that oil prices, the ruble exchange rate, and the Moscow Exchange Index have so far reacted indifferently to Donald Trump's statement. On July 14th, when the American president promised Ukraine new arms supplies and tough sanctions against Russia if peace with Ukraine is not achieved within 50 days. But the consequences for Russia could turn out to be quite significant. A little later, and India became the first warning sign, and here I recommend just listening to this thought until the end. This is where things get really interesting. Donald Trump's new sanctions will include both 100% tariffs on Russian exports to the United States and, more importantly, 100% secondary tariffs against countries that continue to buy oil from Russia. Tariffs on Russian exports are unlikely to scare the Kremlin. In 2024, the trade turnover between Russia and the United States amounted to $3.5 billion. This is the lowest value since 1992. That is, there's really nothing much left to trade there. So of course these tariffs didn't scare the Kremlin. But secondary sanctions against Russia's partners will be very painful, even if the United States imposes them against only one country, against India. More precisely, even just a warning that they might impose them. The White House proposal states that tariffs should be imposed on countries that both purchase raw materials from Russia and do not support Ukraine. There aren't actually that many such countries. It's India and China. By the way, Turkey is no longer on this list since it has helped Ukraine. United States Ambassador to NATO, Matt Whitaker, said tariffs could threaten China and India specifically. And let's be honest, it's almost impossible to imagine that sanctions would be imposed simultaneously against all the countries to which Russia supplies oil. Besides China and India, that's also Turkey, Hungary, and Slovakia. No one has enough oil to quickly replace all of Russia's exports, and that's a problem. But don't jump to conclusions just yet. The United States and China only recently, and not without difficulty, agreed to normalize their mutual trade. It's possible, but hard to imagine that the United States would start a trade war again, and a 100% tariff is a war. Negotiations on trade terms with India are ongoing and not yet finished, simplifying the situation. If things go so far that India really can't buy Russian oil, it will have the opportunity to switch to supplies from other organizations of the petroleum exporting countries members. It's just that they will cost a little bit more. The Indian Minister of Oil discussed this very topic today. India is already stating that they can readily relinquish Russian oil. Although they profited from it, they are prepared to abandon it when necessary. According to experts' forecasts, the global oil market this year will have a surplus, meaning supply will exceed demand by at least 1 million barrels per day. Attention! This is about half of Russia's exports to India, while Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries Plus Agreement participants are sharply increasing production, so the oversupply could turn out to be even more significant. So, you see, India can simply decide to stop buying Russian oil and take the surplus from the global market. It's just easy to buy all of this. Basically, India can really switch to other oil. Then Trump's threats will work. He won't even have to impose those tariffs. He'll say, look, if you don't do it, India is already signaling that it's not a problem. And the conclusion is that even if only India refuses to buy Russian oil, it will already be a huge blow to the Russian economy. Once again, India is the second and at some periods even the #1 buyer of Russian oil, and India is signaling that it is ready to give up Russian resources. That's all for now. Leave your thoughts and conclusions in the comments below. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially through any donation or by sponsoring on YouTube, whichever is more convenient for you. All the links and details are in the description of this video or via the QR code on your screens. I appreciate your support. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles created by